So this session really is about how to take effective notes. What are some different strategies that you might want to consider? Because, being able to keep track of notes and important information in each class is going to be really helpful when you are getting to the point where you need to get prepared for any assignments or any tests that are coming up. I know that there was a lot of great information about different study tips this morning, so this would be kind of in hand to help you get prepared to utilize some of those study tips. So the first tip would be, as much as possible, you want to be prepared for class before you even enter into each class. There are a few things that you can do that can help you get the most out of the class. So some of the things that we would encourage you to consider, no matter what strategy you end up using for note taking. I know there's a few that are very common. We're going to touch on a couple of them today, like Cornell, the 2-column method, as well as the 4R method. And also to looking at taking textbook notes as well. These 4 things that are here can really kind of set the stage for how to make any notes that you do take in whatever strategy or format really work for you. Because did you know that we will remember as little as 20% of what we hear in a lecture after 24 hours if we haven't had an opportunity to review it? So even a quick review of your previous day's notes can help refresh your memory and provide that continuity to your learning. If you don't have time to read a full chapter before it's being presented in class, because in most cases you will have a general idea from your instructor about what chapters will be covered in each lecture or day that you're in class. So if you don't have time to read the whole chapter, we do recommend doing a preview of the chapter. And basically what a preview is just looking at the introductory paragraph, the concluding paragraph, looking at any diagrams and any bolded terms that are there, just becoming more familiarized with the content, because the way that our brains like to make new memories and provide learning is working with what's familiar to the unfamiliar. So the more kind of familiarized you can get with the material prior to going into class, the more it will provide you that sense of being able to say, oh, okay, I really am getting this now, or those aha moments. There is an opportunity you go into class, making note of anything that you have from questions, if you have done any preview of the chapter or pre-reading, or looking at the notes from a previous day, so that you can remember to ask about those when you are in class. So the next step, it probably, sounds silly to say attend class, but this is a key component to note-taking, because you can't always rely on someone else's notes. So by attending class, you do have the opportunity to get the most out of the information that you learn, because you'll be able to get context of the different things, concepts that will be covered through different stories or examples that the instructor or other students bring to that class. It gives you the opportunity to also get a sense of your instructor's personal teaching style, because how they present the information may be indicative of how you may be tested on that information, and what kind of information they feel is important for you to be able to get out of the other resources that are made available to you. And as I said, it does give you the opportunity to ask questions. So if you had questions when you were reviewing the material prior to class, being in class gives you that opportunity to get that clarification. And also too, like, you may feel that you're the only person who has certain questions, but please don't be concerned or worried about asking, because in most cases, whatever question that you have, 10 other students have the same exact question. So, your opportunity to ask that really helps the whole class be able to get more understanding of the concepts that are being presented on as well. So asking questions is a good thing. So if you get too nervous to be able to ask those questions in class, there are other avenues for you to be able to get clarification. So jotting down what your question is and maybe putting it into the chat in the virtual classroom is one way, or you can send an email after class, either to your instructor or to your peers if you need some additional clarification. So the other thing too is it allows you to make those connections. So being able to connect with and chat with other students who are in the class with you is one form of making connections, because you'll be able to make use of those resources after class as well, and connecting with students either in group teamwork, those sorts of things, as well as just being able to make new friends is a really important and integral component of the college experience. The other connections are too that when you have those specific examples that are provided in class, it can really make connections in terms of one concept to the next, because a lot of times what's being discussed is foundational and it builds on itself. So the next part would be, how do I get the most out of the time when I am in class? And so one thing to keep in mind is, you've got this. There's no right or wrong way to take notes. Everyone is different and everyone has a different style. So it's about finding what works best for you. So being open to trying different styles until you find that right fit for you. You may be coming into college with a style that already works well for you, and that's wonderful. So keep doing what works. If you find that it's not quite working for you in this type of environment, then some of the strategies that we're talking about today, you may want to consider trying them out, seeing how they fit, if it is allowing you to get everything that you need in order to best learn the concepts and best prepare for assignments and tests. So especially, something to keep in mind is if note-taking has been difficult for you in the past, just know that there are strategies that can help and be personalized to you. There's different things like digital note organizers, assistive technology solutions, and more. So if you are interested in finding out more about that, stay tuned. There might be some things that are discussed in the assistive technology session. As well, connect with your learning strategist after the session today or at any point in your learning, because we'd be more than happy to work with you to develop a personalized plan for note-taking for you. So let's face it, paying attention for an entire lecture or class can be hard, and especially in a virtual environment now. We've created lots of breaks for you today because it is hard to stay online all day. It does take a lot of energy and focus, and paying attention can be especially difficult in a virtual environment. Also, too, sometimes the topic may not be of particular interest to you, so it's really hard to pay attention. So I'd love to hear what you found helps you stay focused and helps you attend in class in previous educational environments, or what you are hoping to be able to try out when you get started in January. So please pop those into the chat about what can help you stay focused. Some things that may have some help for you would be including getting adequate sleep, making sure that you're fueling your body. I know oftentimes, if you're in class all day and you're on the computer, you may neglect giving yourself a break or stopping for lunch. We would encourage you to do that. And also too, like utilizing some of the different strategies that were discussed today when you're setting up your learning environment to help reduce distractions or reduce noise, so that you are able to help focus and attend. And I don't know, Andrea, did you want to add a couple of things about what can help in maintaining focus and attention when you are taking notes?
Sure. I was just thinking when you were asking for some examples, I was going to start to populate a few of those over into the chat, but I have found like having a stress ball or something like that. So something that I'd be able to kind of have within my hand to give me a little bit of dexterity, a little bit of a difference there. And also silencing notifications. I found that that was helpful. So whether it's through other side chats or through your friends kind of wanting to distract you somewhat from your studies, kind of some of those things have been helpful for me. Yeah, that would be some of the examples that I'd like to give.
Awesome. And also too, sometimes asking yourself a question can help you maintain focus too. So when you get started in a particular lecture, there may be something that you want to get out of the lecture, or a particular thing that you're looking to have answered. If you have or formulate a question for yourself about the topic prior to going into the lecture, when you're listening in to try to see if that can be answered through the lecture, that oftentimes can help us maintain our attention as well. So the last part is just trying to make those connections as you go. So how does the information that I'm learning right now connect with what we've already talked about, or what I previously know prior to coming into this course? The other thing too is, if you're reviewing your notes on a regular basis, through that previous day's notes or summary, what have you discovered from that preview of a chapter, and how can you connect it to what's being discussed right now? So those are other ways that can help you with that, the focusing in, especially when it may be a topic that's not of particular interest, or if you're particularly tired that day, or if it's just really hard to stay in one place for a really long time, because sitting at a desk in front of a computer can be hard, as we mentioned. Other kind of key tips and strategies would be looking at, not trying to get everything down word for word. The one thing about that is that it's going to be really hard to keep up, and it'll get frustrating and you'll get discouraged. The other thing is that when we're trying so hard to write down everything that the instructor is sharing with us, we may lose the gist of what the meaning is of what's being said. So we encourage you to just focus on trying to pull out what are the main points or ideas and concepts. If you can't keep up, always leave spaces so that you can go back and fill that in. So whether you're taking your notes on the computer digitally, would be just skipping down so that you know that you need to go back and fill that in. Or if you're taking handwritten notes, it's leaving a few spaces and then moving on to the next part. So one way to get those blanks filled in would be when it's still fresh at the very end of class, jotting those parts in if you can recall, checking with a classmate, or referring to the class recording if there is one posted after class. So the other kind of key thing to keep in mind with that too is, if the lecture is based on PowerPoint slides, like this session, there's a lot of information that's already filled out for you. So try not to jot everything that's listed in the slide, as you'll most likely be provided with a copy of the slides. But you can always check with your instructor if you're unsure whether those will be provided or not. If you are the type of person who likes to handwrite your notes, you can always, if they're provided prior to class, print those off. And in the print settings, you can set it up so that it'll have the slide, and then there'll be like three or four lines on the other side. So you can jot down your very specific notes per slide. If you're not using the PowerPoint slides printed out, you can always kind of keep track when you are taking those notes in a separate way by saying slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. So if you are getting it afterwards, you can compare the notes back to that. If you are typing your notes and you don't even need to print, you can open it up as a separate document and just fill in or type in the notes beside each of the slides, or in the notes pages right in PowerPoint, because that will help you be able to know which notes go with which slides. So when you are getting ready to study for any tests, that they are there and already connected. If the PowerPoint is provided to you in Brightspace in PDF format, you can use Adobe tools to highlight and make comments and then save. So the question oftentimes is, well, how do I know what is important? And when you are regularly attending class, you'll get a sense from your instructor, how they let people know what's most important. Sometimes if there's a lot of time spent on a specific idea or concept, that's one of the things that can indicate that it is important. You might want to kind of jot down even like the key terms for that to go back and fill in later. If a concept or particular terms are repeated or emphasized, that would be an indicator that it's important information as well. And also in summary statements. So if your instructor kind of closes their lecture and kind of gives a quick summary, oftentimes what's going to fall in that summary statement will be the things that they most want you to focus on from that class. Other things that can indicate whether or not if something is an important thing and that you'll need to jot that down as part of your notes is if the instructor slows down, or if they write it in the virtual board in the virtual classroom, then it's always a good idea to jot that down. Sometimes it's a little more specific and it's not subtle. So they'll say, this may be on a test, or this is really important. So if not, though, if the more subtle ones could be, the main points are, and so you'd want to jot those ones down. If there are any other things that you've learned from, when you've been in school previously that you found that helped you know what's important and what to jot down, please feel free to share those in the chat too, because I always find I learn something new every time I present, and I like to add that in. So the tip number 5 would be using abbreviations. So knowing that there's a lot of material often that will be covered in a lecture, and it is, even if you're jotting down the main points, it can be hard to keep up. So coming up with a strategy on how to provide your own short form or abbreviations for certain words can really help speed up note taking. So there are oftentimes really common ones that you may already be using in everyday practice, like e.g., for example, etc, using a plus sign for and, but there could be so many more that you'll end up finding what works for you. If you're unsure, we do have some resources with some common abbreviations that we can definitely share with you, but you can also likely find some common abbreviations by Googling that as well. So the main thing is that if you are using any abbreviations, when you are reviewing your notes, that evening or within the next, a day or so, if you have a similar short form abbreviation for a couple of different words, just make sure that you write above that abbreviation what that full word is, and that'll save you time and guesswork when it is time to create study notes. So while there are common ones, developing your own set of symbols or abbreviations will come in handy as you're taking your program. Another thing that can help speed up the note taking are using things like telegraphic sentences. And essentially what a telegraphic sentence is a no frills, straight to the point sentence. So you're eliminating all of the the, ands, and using keywords only. So an example of a telegraphic sentence would be, will arrive 3 p.m., no go sleep. So when you are reviewing it, you can pull together the gist of what that meaning is, but without all the extra words. So the next section is really just looking at choosing the strategy. So no matter what strategy you use, I know there's a couple here, the Cornell method and the 2-column or 4R method. Whichever version you end up using, starting each day or lecture with a fresh page or a fresh document, dating it, and then having a way to keep track of what page comes when. If you're doing Word documents, that'll automatically happen. But if you're doing written notes, writing at the top of the page what page number that is can be very helpful. So if you are doing things that are more paper-based, using a separate binder for each course can be very helpful to organize your information and keep track. If you are doing it digitally, setting up a folder for each course or each chapter, those things can be very helpful for you as well. So just a way for you to organize all of the information and the efforts that you're putting forward into note-taking, it is something that can be really helpful. It also makes it easier to add in different things if you are using a separate binder for paper-based. So if you're having any handouts or inserting any missed notes from a missed day, you can add those in fairly easily. So we're going to talk about one particular method today, and that's the Cornell method. And the Cornell method really will give you a great way to organize your information as you're writing, but it also gives you some strategies on what you can fill in after your lecture as well. So in a Cornell method, you'd be dividing your page into 3 different sections. The left-hand side would be kind of where you're jotting down the main ideas or key terms and questions. And the questions could be like for you to be quizzing yourself afterwards. So it's really can be used as a study guide too. The right-hand side would be filling in more of the details. So, descriptions or examples or diagrams, things like that would go into that right-hand side. And then there's a section on the bottom called the bottom summary row. And that allows you to take a few minutes at the end of each class to summarize in your own words what the main ideas or the gist of what was covered in that lecture. And there's a quick video that I hope we'll have time for that really speaks to why that is such an important piece, because it does help you not only from memory, but from learning as well, is taking that few extra minutes at the end of each class to do that. So here, let's see if we can get this to work. Can everyone see okay?
Cornell Notes are a helpful study tool in class, while reading a textbook, or when using online resources. Writing key information down as you learn will help you retain more. How do you use Cornell Notes in a variety of learning environments? You can modify the Cornell note-taking system to match your learning situation and needs. The Notes section is where you write down what the professor says and what she puts on the board, but you don't need to write down every word. Useful notes capture both the gist of what's being said and the important details. Using abbreviations and symbols can help you keep up. If you're learning from a video or online text, treat it just like class and write down the information you think you'll need to know. Different online resources have different options for taking notes. Find out what's available and what will work best for you. Students use the Q section for all kinds of questions and comments. Traditionally, the Q column of Cornell Notes is used after you take your notes. This is the place where students add questions that will help them remember or organize the material. Using the Q section idea for textbook reading can help you identify what you still need to study more. With many online textbooks, you can use a comments or notes feature that will allow you to do your notes and Q questions online, or just use regular paper. One of the best things about using Cornell Notes is that it gives you the opportunity to keep your brain active in several different ways. Some students find it helpful to use the Q and note columns simultaneously. Write down what you need to learn while you're thinking analytically at the same time. Some students find the standard Cornell Notes setup doesn't give them enough room, so they open their notebook to a new page for each class. They use the whole width of the page for their notes section and the back page of notes from the last class for their cue section. If you're given class slides ahead of time, you can just draw a line to make an area for regular notes and a cue area. Using the cue column for your questions while you are writing more factual notes in the notes section is a powerful learning tool. This kind of thinking can help you stay active during a lecture or class. The summary is the place where, if someone asks, "What did you learn today?" you can tell them in just a few sentences. The summary can be challenging, but don't skip it. The ability to go back and forth from details to the big picture will help you learn, and is a great skill to have for school, work, and life. Taking facts and distilling them into main ideas is a powerful learning tool. You're making your brain digest what the professor said, and you're transforming it into your own knowledge. Try to get to the summary soon after class, while the information is still fresh in your head. Looking back at your summary before the next class is a good way to see connections throughout the semester. You can use any part of the Cornell note-taking system, no matter how you're learning the material. Taking notes on the information helps you remember it better than just listening or reading. Asking yourself questions about what you are learning keeps your brain active and activates higher-level thinking beyond just memorizing. It lets you apply, analyze, and evaluate what you are learning. Summarizing makes you go from details to the big picture. Try out Cornell Notes and learn what works for you.
Okay, so that really was a great kind of a 4-minute summary of what we've talked about so far. Another method that's very similar to that, but it does not have the summary bottom row, is the 2-column method or the 4R method. And in this strategy, the reason why this might be a helpful strategy to use too is it can help, similar to Cornell method, to organize your information and organize your notes, but it also can be used as a handy study sheet because you can fold the sheet up in half like a flashcard when you are getting prepared for tests and exams. It does allow you to easily scan and look for information as well, and the same would be true for the Cornell method. So the 2-column method or the 4R method, and the 4 R's stand for record, reduce, recall, and review. In this, in the left-hand side would be, again, main ideas, key terms, and questions that would go on that side. And in the right-hand column would be important details or answers. So when you are recording, you're recording facts and concepts with detail from the lecture. So that would go into that right-hand column. So it would include things like descriptions, definitions, diagrams, or explanations for some main ideas for what you've had in the left-hand side. Speaking of left-hand, that is your cue column or your main ideas column. So here you would be looking at trying to reduce those facts or reduce that information into keywords or phrases for yourself. This would also be areas where you could ask questions so that if you were quizzing yourself or you had somebody at home or virtually online quizzing you, like a friend or a peer, what would go into that column. And then in terms of recall, that would be using for study purposes. So again, you could either fold the paper, or you can just cover the right-hand side with your hand and using those cues or questions to check to make sure that you have a good understanding or that you know the details. So it can serve to let you know what you need to spend a little bit more time on to make sure that you've got it. And you can check to see if you were able to get everything when you did quiz yourself. The review part is just making sure that you're going back and reviewing those things on a regular basis, because when you review your notes on a regular basis, that in and of itself is a study strategy. And as we mentioned before, if you're not reviewing soon after, within 24 hours of of class, you will lose a lot of the important details from the lecture without having that kind of chance to recheck that. So speaking of review, that within 24 hours is super important. It does also give you an opportunity if you are handwriting or even when you're typing. Sometimes what we are jotting in may not be something that when we look back at it in 2 weeks or so that would make as much sense to us. So it gives us an opportunity to rework our notes, not rewrite it from the beginning, but anything that's illegible that you'll be able to kind of cross out and write down so that you can read it, or reword it in a way that makes better sense for you when you will go back and use it as a study strategy. When you are reviewing, it gives you opportunity with any new unfamiliar terms to look those up and then jot down what the definitions are for those. If you are using the cue column after class, it gives you that opportunity to write those cues in the left-hand column for Cornell notes. And it does give you the opportunity to compare what you've learned and taken from lecture in your notes to the textbook and the textbook notes. And also there is that opportunity to say, oh, what do I need to check with my instructor on, or ask questions to get clarification. So to pull it all together, to give yourself that best kind of leg up for note taking is preparing before you go to class, making sure that you attend regularly. If you do happen to have to miss a class, that's okay. Just reach out and make sure you can have a peer who's been in the class that you can ask for notes, or if it is recorded, go back and make sure you build in time to review the recording. When you are taking any notes, focusing on recording the main points and not getting everything down word for word, choosing and picking a strategy that works best for you, and then taking some time at the end to summarize it in your own words to make it your own. And then making sure that you go back and review those on a regular basis, because that will help it make more sense for you overall to pull those concepts together, but it also helps you with the memory and the recall when you need it, which is oftentimes when you're doing assignments, labs, and tests. So any questions? Comments? All right, well, thank you everyone for taking your time. I think we are very close to the end of our time. Sure, Andrea, what time were we scheduled to finish up?
2:05, so we're right on track. So if
Alright.
anybody does have any questions, we'd be more than happy to field any of those. I think within the chat, there's been like a couple good tips. One person mentioned that they like to decorate their notes to kind of keep focused and on task. And although it used to be seen that this was a time wasting activity, that it actually improves your focus and your capabilities. If you are a doodler, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it actually keeps your brain active and engaged, and it might actually stretch out your focus time. So that was a great tip, Shauna. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I just put down, like, when you're sitting at your desk for a long period of time as well, like getting up and stretching and moving around, it again kind of boosts your overall productivity, and your back and your muscles will really appreciate you at the end of the day if you get up and you move around and you get kind of out of that seated position that you're going to be in a long length of time as you're listening to your lectures, your classes. One other thing that I mentioned was that although it's easy to kind of do your notes on your computer, it is a little bit faster depending upon your keyboarding skills. But research has shown that the old pen and paper is kind of a tried and true method, that it actually stimulates your brain waves and it gets you the information into your recall a lot easier, because you're focused more on kind of that activity and that task. It actually is more beneficial to do the old paper and pen. I'm not saying that's best, but depending upon your method and what works for you, that might be one that does. So those were just some additional things that were over in the comment section. Victoria said early, often, and great is a great motto for reviewing. So making sure you review everything as soon as you can. Again, kind of keeps it fresh. If you review it more than once, it again kind of helps bank that information into your long-term memory. So the more often you do that, the less prepared you're going to, the less work you're going to have to do to prepare for your upcoming tests and exams because you've already done that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your comments and your tips. Please keep them coming as we continue out the rest of the afternoon. But that concludes our session for note-taking tips for